Welcome. My name is Jim Hamilton. I'm with CompTIA, and I have the privilege today of sharing with you our industry report. It's fresh, hot off the presses from just 2 weeks ago, our 2019 Industry Outlook Report. And so I'm going to be sharing some really fascinating trends, a little bit of industry data, and as well some information about the workforce globally in the tech industry. But just a little bit about us to start with. We are CompTIA. We are the world's largest nonprofit industry trade association representing the tech industry. Now, that's a mouthful, but essentially we advocate on behalf of the tech industry to raise the bar for everybody. Most people know about us because of our certifications, A+, Network Plus, Server Plus. These generate revenue for us that we put back into the industry to help grow it in the form of education. This research is actually an example of the kind of education that CompTIA delivers as a result of those resources. We build communities. In fact, we just held a meeting here over at the Akura to launch a Benelux community here for this region. So we have regions globally. We have technical communities. Sorry, we have regional communities, technical communities, as well as workforce communities. And then we advocate on behalf of the industry, as well as give back through philanthropic efforts and just helping grow the workforce of tomorrow by helping disadvantaged people get into the workforce. So that's a little bit about us and where we're coming from. I want to talk about the tech industry to start out with. And I often think that the future has arrived. We're living in the future. These are just a few headlines that are from the last couple of months. Duplex Talking AI that Google has. It's basically a voice assistant that sounds like a human, makes calls on behalf of you as if it was talking to another human, and very effective at doing this over the phone through natural language. The second one here is Waymo gets the green light to test fully driverless cars in California. I remember 2014 when driverless cars were just coming onto the scene. Everybody was saying in 5 years, 5 to 6 years, you would see driverless cars on the road. And we're seeing this happen in 2019 and 2020 in an even much bigger way. And this last example I love because it's a Dutch example is that using CRISPR, a gene editing tech, they're actually able to change wheat, the DNA of wheat, to make it gluten safe. And for any of you out there who are celiacs, this is a tremendous advantage that makes wheat much more accessible to a much larger part of the population. So just incredible things that are happening every day with respect to technology to the point that it's becoming a little bit blasé. So I'm going to share a little bit about the market overview. So these statistics are from our research department and also shared from other partners like IDC and Gartner. So first of all, the global ICT industry is a whopping 4.4 trillion euros. That's such a big number that I think it's pretty much meaningless to most people. To give you an idea, think about 15, 20 years ago when we were talking about the biggest companies, the biggest industries in the world. We were talking about financial companies. We were talking about energy companies. We were talking about large real estate companies. Today we're talking about tech companies, where the 5 largest companies in the world by market cap are all tech companies. On top of that, technology is changing the world we live in. It's changing our daily activities. It's changing how we go about our daily routines. It's changing our homes, our schools, our workplaces. So it's a tremendous time to be in the tech industry. A few key categories of the ICT industry. You see how it's broken down. 11% software, 22% device and infrastructure, 21% IT business and services, 17% emerging tech, and 30% telecom services. We're focused this week on the Benelux market, and what's really interesting to look at in this data is that a lot of the areas where the Benelux market is much larger are really in those emerging spaces. So for example, 11% software globally, we see 16% software adoption in the Benelux. We see 21% going into IT business and services, but we see 29% in IT business and services. Emerging tech, they're holding their own at 17%. And telecom, which has actually been declining year over year, we see a much smaller amount at 21% as everything goes to an IP backbone and everything travels over a network. So again, just seeing tremendous forward-looking market in the Benelux region. Emerging tech categories drive new revenue growth. We're expecting to see over the next 5 years that emerging tech, things like IoT and SaaS and robotics and AR and VR, big data, all of these things are going to contribute 53% to revenue growth in this region alone. And the trend is similar globally. And then if you look at that 5-year period, emerging tech is actually going, the revenue is going to double over those 5 years. So a tremendous opportunity to invest in emerging tech and to build a business around emerging tech and to look at the adoption of emerging tech as a means of transforming society. The ever-expanding ICT workforce. Here we're looking again at the Benelux region. The European average is 3.7% of the workforce are ICT specialists. In Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Belgium, we're looking at 5% roughly across the board. So again, a much larger portion of the population is in the ICT industry, a great indicator for the health of this region. As well, employers who are trying to hire ICT folks, you see an 8% average across the European Union, and yet 13% across this region. So again, a very strong technical workforce. This is US data, but it bears out here as well, and that is that US jobs posting analyst confirms the growth of emerging tech. So if you look from 2015, where we saw 55% growth in emerging tech jobs, to this year, where we see 74%, it's a huge growth area, just bolstering the data and the statistics that I showed on the last slide. As well, folks are hiring. There's what we are calling the future gap. Not only is there all this emerging tech coming onto the market, but we're having trouble getting it into the hands of businesses and consumers. One, because we don't have the skills necessary to actually implement the data, the new technology. But two, that there's just this lag between innovation and then the adoption of tech in the market. So as you see here, 52% of tech firms are hiring because they need new skills in new areas, such as emerging tech. I want to drop into about 7 trends that we're seeing in the industry, kind of macro trends that are new for 2019. A lot of trends that you might expect to see in here aren't going to be in here because they're covered in previous year's report. Security, for example, is still a very big topic. Big data and analytics, these are all very big topics. And we try to cover new trends and new things that we're seeing in the market through our industry report. So the first thing I want to say, we're always looking for the next big thing. And what our research indicates is that we've come into an era where there really isn't any one next big thing. And what I mean by that is, you think back to the 90s and the adoption of the internet and browsers and just people getting connected and using email. That was a big thing. You think of social media in the early 2000s. Again, another big thing that came and burst onto the market. You think about smartphones and how that fundamentally changed what we do as people and how we work. That was a big thing that changed what we were doing. What we're seeing in this age is that tech is so pervasive and it's so multidimensional that one small advance in one area can have rippling effects across the whole industry. And the things that are truly innovative are actually people who can cobble together these various building blocks of technology, and we're seeing multiple advances in multiple areas as a result of this just broadening of the tech world. So let me give you a few examples. Cloud, edge, and 5G form the modern economic infrastructure. If you think over the last 150 years, the economic growth around the world was attributed to things like roads, railways, electricity being widely available and power plants being put into place, water and sewage and sanitation, and cities and financial infrastructures, right? And this created this incredibly fertile environment for business to thrive. And we've come through a period of economic growth unseen in the last, in human history. What we're looking at now is what we're calling the fourth industrial revolution. And what I mean by that is that cloud, edge, and 5G just aren't interesting technologies that allow us to do innovative things, but they actually are the underpinning of a new economic infrastructure. So when you think about cloud and the ability to do computing wherever, whenever, the scalability and flexibility of cloud and what that means to business. You combine that with edge computing and the ability to take vast amounts of data, make sense of it locally, and then centralize it in the cloud. And then you think about the launch of 5G networks and this pervasive networking that you can access anywhere and incredibly high amounts of bandwidth. We're creating this economic infrastructure that's going to usher in the fourth industrial revolution and allow businesses and society to grow unlike we've seen before. So it's very exciting to see. This is largely infrastructure that I'm talking about, but it's giving rise to all sorts of things that we'll see in our daily life. Which brings me to my second point, and that is this idea of ambient computing. Just curious, how many people in the audience have heard the term ambient computing before? Okay, a few people, that's good, a few hands. But unlike the last trend that I was talking about, which was really tied to the infrastructure and what the underpinnings of technology are, this is really how the end user is going to experience technology in the next 5 years. We see devices everywhere becoming smart, right? We're all familiar with IoT, and computing is no longer restricted to a laptop or a desktop at a kiosk or even a smartphone, but thermostats and lights and all sorts of different things are becoming smart and can actually compute and create vast amounts of data. Now that's interesting, but what happens when you combine it with something as powerful as AI? AI that you can access from anywhere over the cloud, take advantage of this massive amounts of computing power, and then use it to make really smart decisions on behalf of people in their daily lives. That's ambient computing. Let me give you another example, a more practical example. If you think about a light bulb and you've connected it to the internet, well, now you can turn it on and off remotely, right? That's stage one. Stage two is then maybe you can set up some automation and you can say, well, when the sun comes up, I want the lights to go off. When the sun goes down, I want the lights to come on. And maybe I want to dim the lights at 10 o'clock. And maybe you have different patterns for different days of the week. That's stage two. Now if you take and add AI to that kind of environment, where the AI is actually learning about your behaviors, understanding where you are because of the data you produce every day, understanding your preferences, and combine it with really smart behavioral analysis, you actually get computing that starts to make decisions for you in your daily life that are beneficial. And if you think about the episodes of Black Mirror where people walk into their home and all of a sudden their home is doing all sorts of things and they're not even thinking about it, or if you've seen the movie Passengers recently where they walk around the spaceship and the spaceship interacts with them in a very natural way, this is the kind of idea of ambient computing. Where you have this very powerful experience and a great opportunity for businesses. Not only that, it takes the IT people, the technical people away from actually programming and configuring, and they have to think more about, well, how do people behave? How can I produce a delightful outcome for these people and tie all these pieces together so that it makes their lives better? And so it's a very strategic, high value add way of thinking about computing. I want to talk about DLT, digital distributed ledger transfer, a little bit. So it's actually been a bit of a tough year for people who have been invested in digital ledger transfer. I'm not sure how many Bitcoin owners there are out there. I don't think Bitcoin has had a tremendous year. In fact, cryptocurrencies in general have had a difficult year. But there's this tremendous opportunity for distributed ledger technology that still exists, but we're kind of at the top of the hype cycle, where there's a lot of possibility, and I'll talk a little bit about that possibility in established financial infrastructures. So if you think about cryptocurrency and the opportunity to remove a middleman, to remove cost, to be able to make a better experience for the end user, there's absolutely an opportunity for disruption in financial markets. And then you think about maybe emerging markets or developing markets where there is no infrastructure at all. I don't know how many of you have seen the IBM commercial that talks about people in a developing country who are collecting plastic and that they're using blockchain then to convert that plastic into cash. So this is an example where distributed ledger transfer or technology, can tremendously benefit places where there just isn't the infrastructure already and leapfrog over a lot of the things that we take for granted in the first world. On top of that, though, there's also a little bit of disillusionment. It's very difficult to use apps that properly process blockchain or cryptocurrencies. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to use a Bitcoin wallet. It's not a great experience. Also, you think about just how slow those transactions can potentially be, especially when you're talking about billions of transactions a day globally. And then on top of it, when you think of the giant compute farms that we've built to build consensus and to help run this DLT technology, it's just not that efficient yet. So while 2019 there's going to be a great focus on distributed ledger technology, there's also going to be a real vetting out, and hype will give way to reality. So we'll see how that pans out in 2019. Stackable technology supercharged digitization efforts. It's kind of going back to my earlier comment about there being the next big thing. What people are doing and savvy CIOs are doing is they're able to piece together a lot of compartmentalized technology, stackable technology, to put it together to make a very powerful solution. So a couple of examples. Agrotech, farming, right? One of the oldest industries known to us. If you could take things like IoT, which are very modular, and put those devices in the ground that measure water and things like fertilization and temperature, and those generate a whole bunch of data that you can then use data analytics on and understand better what's happening with your crops and make good decisions about what's happening with your crops. And then in real time, you can use things like drones and aerial photography to provide real feedback on the things that you're doing and a much better understanding of what's happening across your crops. All of a sudden, you've stacked on top of one another at least 3 technologies, at least 3, and you're able to automate and provide a very tech-savvy solution for an industry like agriculture. If you think about things like retail and making the buying experience that much more enjoyable. Again, things like mobile pay, things like AR, things like virtual agents, and the ability to tie all those together to make a very strong experience for the consumer. Again, another great opportunity for CIOs, for companies to build very sophisticated technologies that aren't any one technology, but they're all stacked together and put together in innovative ways. It's very exciting. Business of emerging technology prompts sales channels reinvention. So there's often a little bit of pushback when we talk about emerging technology to channel companies and solution providers about emerging technology and the need to adopt them. We often hear, well, my business is fine, and I don't really feel the need to go into these technologies at the moment, so why should I even be worrying about them? And truth be told, there is both equal hype and reality in emerging tech as it moves out into the marketplace. In 2019, we're going to see a lot less of the hype and a lot more of the reality. The ability to think about something like AI, which, truth be told, is probably going to be built into products that people sell, but then to take that technology and be able to tell people about it in a compelling way that helps their business and how they can leverage it, that immediately is a competitive advantage against anybody else you're competing with. So there's this opportunity for people to lead the charge through changing the way they bring products to market through the sales channel. Additionally, sales channel companies who are willing to invest in their own IP and take this technology and build novel and interesting solutions can see huge margins and huge opportunities through doing that. So yes, a little bit of hype, a little bit of reality, but we're decreasing on the hype side and we're increasing on the reality side. Partnerships bridge gaps in the new tech ecosystem. Traditionally, the channel has had trouble with partnerships, and that is that partnerships require work. They require far more than just a handshake. They require a listing of accountabilities, a constant check-in on making sure those accountabilities are working, constant testing of, are we getting out of this partnership what we want? Is it benefiting both parties? And so, partnerships have been in the channel for a long time, but as we're seeing all of these new ecosystems come into the marketplace, there's an opportunity like never before for partnerships. 2 out of 3 channel companies report that they do engage in partnerships, and they do engage in them successfully. And where we're seeing them is we're seeing them in places like where a traditional infrastructure company, servers, switches, routers, that sort of thing, partners with a business app company that's producing great business outcomes for people. And so the two parties come together. One doesn't know anything about putting in infrastructure. The other has a hard time with the business outcome that they specialize in. And that by tying them together, again, you have a very powerful solution. So partnerships bridge the gap in the new tech ecosystem. Additionally, as you think about different types of ecosystems, I mean, here at ISE, we have audiovisual companies, and I've been walking around, you see all sorts of smart buildings companies, you see all sorts of different industries and verticals, and there's this opportunity to work with those verticals, again, to realize even greater opportunities. Truth be told, everything's over IP. The IT person is sitting in a pretty good spot, and people all need to be plugged into the IP network. And so there's this great opportunity starting in the ICT industry to build partnerships that are very profitable and work for all parties involved. Last point is this, and that's global tech hubs put spotlight on the ingredients of innovation. This one does my heart good. As you think about the world in general, and you think about where technology innovation typically has come from, it's been relatively small economy or small places on the globe. Not small in size from an economy perspective, but the Silicon Valleys of the world and different tech hubs that have been traditional tech hubs. Today, with the I have trouble saying that word, democratization of technology, with a credit card, a broadband connection, access to the cloud, you can spin up an innovative new company pretty quickly. In addition, populations around the globe are becoming much more educated and tech savvy and a ready and willing workforce. And then on top of that, you have just these very fertile environments that governments and private sector are creating to foster innovation. Lastly, talent is mobile, and talent will go where it needs to go. And people are creating very livable cities, very appetizing places to work, places to raise a family. CompTIA did a research recently on tech towns, and it was focused on the United States. But surprisingly, a lot of the places that were growing significantly, it was all about lifestyle. It was about being able to afford a house. It was being able to, raise your kids. It was about, not living in a place that was incredibly crowded. And so all of this is an example of why we're just starting to see innovation come from all parts of the globe, which is really exciting for people in general. And the traditional places will still stay dominant, but we'll start to see innovation and much more innovation coming from other parts of the globe. So that's it for the presentation on the 2019 industry outlook, but I just want to share a little bit. CompTIA is a nonprofit. We do what we do to help the industry. And one of the principal ways we do help the industry is through creating communities to bring people together to solve common problems and address common opportunities. We have many regional communities around the world. We have communities in Canada, the UK. We have communities in Australia, New Zealand. We have 7 communities in the United States. And I'm proud to announce that we're launching a new Benelux community here for this region. And if this is of interest to you and you'd like to participate, learn how you can contribute to it, this is going to be a community for the industry and by the industry. And CompTIA, as a nonprofit industry trade association, is proud to support it to benefit the industry at large. Please come speak to one of me, or I have a couple of colleagues down here. They can wave their hands and at the back there. But we'd love to share with you a little bit more about this. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm happy to entertain questions later, but thank you for your time and attention.